at 2-0, or will they? They take down the Kraken, one hit from win.
Remember that there are no Vayne turrets available. They might look to try and end the game themselves.
Betsis,
They've done it!
is Game 3 from Liberation X.
Liberation X! Oh man, what a fantastic game. I just can't believe it, I'm lost for words. What an amazing series we have.
Hi, my name is Taewon Yun. I'm actually general manager for Asia Pacific for Megacorp, and also in charge of eSports strategy. I usually talk a little about my background before I speak about esports, because over the last 18 years-ish, I have been heavily involved with a lot of esports-related titles, including FIFA in EA, StarCraft 1 and 2 in Blizzard, World of Tanks in Wargaming now with Vainglory in Sport Evil. So nowadays, like everyone talks about esports. Like just before this speech, there was another panel, and then there's one more panel after this. So I think it was starting 2 years ago that esports started to get a lot of attention from mainstream media and also from other companies. And if you carefully look at what they're talking about, you will actually see quite a few different ideas on what esports really is. Some of the ambitious people talks about, we can overtake ESPN with their revenues. And then some are really confused that they're spending huge amount of money on esports, but they don't really understand what esports is yet over the 5 years of effort. And then I guess most of the people who are interested in esports is interested in as a way of marketing their games. So before I start, I think that I feel the need to define what esports means to me, and also to Sport Evil, and also our game Vainglory. So first of all, a lot of people I also define it as competitive gaming. But if you think about, if you define esports as a competitive gaming alone, then you will realize that computer gaming has been competitive from the beginning. The first ever computer game, Pong, was, if you think about it, it is a little bit competitive in a sense. So what changed over time is actually the word esports started to come out when it becomes actually watching someone else is playing competitive gaming. It also doesn't quite satisfy the definition, I think, that. So I added one more, where like spectating a competitive gaming, which has a fair rule. Because if the rule is not fair, then you cannot really call it a sport, in my opinion. So that is the definition I'm using. So also, like, looking at what's happening in this industry, but one big question, a couple of big questions I start to have is that, like, what will happen if game publishers stop subsidizing or sponsoring their own game at esports? Will it survive? Also, what other sports only have pros? Like a lot of games, which wants to be a esports, they start with a like big fancy event, kind of like pro scene, but that is not the same with traditional sports. And why no one talks about the audience is another question I always have, because in my definition, if there's no one watching your game played by someone else, then it really is not esports from the sense I see it. It just becomes a competitive gaming that you have already seen before. So I like to use football as an example. Like the way you get to know football is actually you play it with a ball, going out, playing with a friend in the alley. If you're good, you will become playing at school, clubs, community, even national team or pros, and then ultimately you will play at FIFA World Cup. So it starts with a small community and goes all the way up to world level competition. And then most of the cases, like in esports, they start with the FIFA first, World Cup first, and then like say it is a esports. So that's where we have a lot of problem. Basically the question was, where is the backyard of esports? So as a game company who wants to bring our game into an esports industry, we thought that from the beginning that like it needs to have two pillars. Professional esports that are existing in other games needs to be, yes, that is important, but without backyard esports, having only in professional esports will be meaningless, in our opinion, unless there is a marketing gimmick. So in the end, we also wanted to build a sustainable esports ecosystem. The question I asked about, what happens if, as a publisher, we stopped funding esports effort, will it survive? And the answer to us is that it has to survive, which means that every single parties that are involved in esports ecosystem needs to be profitable. That will include the event organizers like ESL, production companies, channels, teams, casters, and developer as a game developer ourselves. So that is something we wanted to start from the beginning. And then the other reason why we wanted to build Vainglory as a esports game is that we believe that we had the conviction that mobile, unlike like people actually got surprised that we are trying to make Vainglory as a mobile esports, because that you cannot make like mobile esports. But if you think about it, it actually makes perfect sense. I talked about how traditional sports start with like community and backyard and move on to like pro scene, and that is a missing puzzle in PC and console, in my opinion, because like it is not having a backyard experience in PC and console is quite difficult. Yes, you have like you can play your friends' home, or you can go to PC game room and play with the friends, but with mobile, like everyone has one mobile phone in your back pocket, so pulling out that and playing with your friends everywhere in the backyard and back alley is a natural theme for like mobile gaming. That's where I started to focus that like this could be actually the natural theme for esports. Again, like everyone will have one of these, meaning that there's a huge market. And then finally, the mobile device itself is already like powerful enough to play a core game that we wanted to develop. In other words, if there are about 700 to 800 million gaming PC that can run League of Legends, and there are more than 3 billion mobile touchscreens that can run games like Vainglory. And then starting last year, like people already realized that iPhone 6, for example, is almost as powerful as MacBook. But the problem is that like making esports game is not easy, because obviously like any game has to be fun to play, but if you want to make a esports game, then it has to also fun to watch some other guys are playing. Not every game fit the bill. Also, as an esport, it needs to be fair. So hopefully, like the paying monetization doesn't impact the game balance. And also, like it is spectator entertainment, which means that it needs to be easy to broadcast, like either through Twitch-like streaming or to traditional TV. And finally, this is a very important point that a lot of people forget, that it needs to support like two very different type of gameplay, where when you as a newbie you play, and then as a pro when you play, it kind of like need to be able to show off like differences. You know, like when you again thinking about FIFA experiences. You know, like when Messi plays football and your friend in the backyard, like they are playing the same game, but it will look completely different. So that is one of the reasons why we actually focus on a lot on the like mobile like game engine ourselves, because so supporting like really fast response time was important to make that differences in real-time game. And also we have a like separate spectator client which can be used to broadcast the Vainglory game. It is a Mac-based client and support like 8 different camera views, which means that the like we can create the FIFA-like broadcasting with our game, even though it's a like mobile game. And it also support like 4K resolution. Unfortunately, the game itself supports 4K, but the most of the TV station in the world doesn't support it yet, so we haven't had a chance to showcase yet. So in the end, like this is the game we made. So oftentimes I get questions from people that, you know, what do you focus a lot most on as a KPI in like esports game? Like in our case, it was actually the Twitch view, because we knew that that, like I said, you know, if you want to build a esports game, then how many people are actually interested in and watching are the basically indicator for our performance. Another one was actually how many minutes people were playing in the game. That basically tells us how fun the game itself is, right? So we only focused on like how many people are watching on Twitch and how many minutes people are playing, and then we didn't focus at all on monetization part. So we studied the like professional esports after spending quite a lot of time building community esports, and like it started roughly 10 months ago in July 2015. We already like gave away close to $500,000 in prize money. Over 1,000 professional teams are starting to form up across the world. And then quite a lot of different professional teams in US and Europe creating Vainglory division, including SK Gaming, G2 Esports, you know, Team Secret, and so on. And in 2015, we had 20 million plus stream views in Twitch. Like over the months, we actually achieved over 1,000% increase in terms of stream views. And then also Twitch mentioned that like we were the fastest growing mobile game of the year. And now actually we had a partnership with Twitch now that Twitch has become our production company for our esports championship in North America and Europe. And another thing is that we grew 8 times in terms of play hours of the gameplay in 2015, which was pretty spectacular for a game which has never done any kind of paid marketing at all. So Yes, and now we have Amazon Coins, Red Bull, Nvidia, and so on as our sponsors in our game tournament as well. But before all this happened, what is more important to us and also to build all this was that like how to build backyard esports. To make it happen, we developed the in-game season support system, guild and teams. Basically, like encourage people to team up and play as a teams, creating a easy competitive scenes. And we are also actively working with our community doing offline LAN parties so that they can actually realize that actually meeting up and playing is a fun way to enjoy Vainglory, meaning this also leading to them creating their own community-run tournament and so on. So, like incredibly, now we have community-run esports tournament pretty much everywhere in the world, including in South Asia, in Cambodia, Myanmar, and Bangladesh. So that was pretty incredible when I heard from our community manager that, yeah, now we have a community-run tournament in Bangladesh last month. That was crazy. So we are also focused a lot on growing the pie. So we are not, Riot Games, which has over 5,000 employees and own entire league system. Sport Evil, even though our name is Sport Evil Megacorp, our size is fairly small. We are still 45 people. And we don't want to grow the number of people on our team too big, which means that we need to work with global regional partners to make all this happen. That's hopefully some of you guys can come in South Asia. And then we also, again, like big focus of us is supporting like our community to their own, host their own event and own tournament. And also like to create the like sustainable ecosystem, we help work with the amateur teams for them to go pro. When pro teams are interested in acquiring Vainglory teams, we kind of like working as a brokers and so on. Also, for some of the smaller community organizers, we actually directly contact with the sponsor companies so that they can actually work with them. But eventually, what we want is that, in the end, we want to be just focusing on game development, and then all these like independent partners of us actually running the esports for us. That is what we hope. In previous panel, the moderator asked that, that predicting what's going to happen in 5 to 10 years from now in esports is going to be too hard to predict. So what do you think that what's going to happen in 2 years' time? When I heard that question, I was telling myself, well, you know what? Actually, predicting 5 to 10 years is easy, because we built all this with a vision that in 5 to 10 years' time, Vainglory or someone else similar to us has become as big as football in terms of sports, spectating, entertainment. That we believe is going to happen, and we want to be one of them. Predicting 1 to 2 years from now, it actually is very hard to predict, because there are a lot of parties are involved in this business trying to make it happen. So what kind of route we take to reach that future in 5 years, that's unknown, but I think that is the goal. And then we will be there within 10 years, I believe. Finally, the lesson we learned so far running all this is that doing esports is a lot of time and energy. So if you think this is like a marketing gimmick, then you may want to rethink. You will have to carefully design your game as well to support all these esports features. And you actually don't decide to make your game as esports. Your community will tell you you are ready to become an esports or not. And of course, it's a long-term investment. All right, that's it. Thank you for listening.
Interesting talk. Thank you. You mentioned one of the challenges is the maybe the casual audience and the pro audience wants some different things. Can you think of an example of maybe a difficult design decision that your team had to make for one or the other, or to compromise between that difficulty?
I think that it is less of a challenge, but more of the business model wise, most of the mobile games, you actually has a lure of creating pay-to-win features. So if you want to make an esports, that is something that you shouldn't do, because it will make it really difficult for you to make it legitimate esports. That's what I talked about. You have to think, how this will look not only to your playing audience, but also someone who is watching over their shoulder. Right, that is sort of design decision needs to be put into when you design your game as an esports. So if you want to make it an esports and then doing a casual tournament, fine, who cares, right? But once you make that as a pro scene with the huge amount of prize money, now it suddenly becomes really tense. Everyone is really sensitive about what's going on, right? So that is what I meant by not having a pay to win. So, yeah, but community, small event as a marketing gimmick, that's fine, right? Clash Royale is a great game. If you ask me, I think that if I'm Supercell, I will put in some mode in there that is not pay to win, and then make that as esports. And I bet that they will do it within a year.
Well, I guess that wraps it up. Thank you, Taewon, for the very enlightening session.